Oh no, my bones! They hurt. And that's me, Van Lee, with the hurty bones. It's Halloween season, of course, and we're doing more creepypastas. And how I get in the Halloween spirit is to make my bones hurt, which is real. My bones consistently hurt.
How many of your bones hurt?
Up to 4 of the 7.
I was going to say that's most of them.
Most of them. How many bones do you have, Spencer?
I have at least 8 because I think I have more bones than you.
True, correct. It happens over time. Well,
it's not consistent. We all have different amounts.
Give us a spooky thing for you. My bones hurt. What happens to spooky for you?
My toes are all black.
That fucking sucks.
Just my toes. The rest of me's fine, but the toes have turned black and they may be rotting. I don't know.
Brian Vaughn, what's your malady? Your spooky malady?
Haunted by the specter of an empty future.
So yours is just a psychological thing.
Just like all my shit.
It's pretty realistic.
I would like to get in better shape.
I would say that of the 3 of us, I think Spencer's is the least realistic with the black toes.
Black toes?
Like, my bones do hurt. Brian
I'm looking
is sad.
at Spencer's toes right now, and they are
I like to
frostbitten.
do my podcasting barefoot.
Yeah, you have your feet out all the time. Feet are so gross.
A lot
Don't
of
like
people
feet.
don't like feet. Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, I don't really understand why anyone would ever want to just like put their foot out for display.
Well,
just
some
do.
people are real into that, I guess, but I will say this about my own feet. I felt seen when I saw the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
You do have massive, disgusting feet.
Long,
impressively.
hairy feet.
And you've got that thing where your middle toe
Yeah.
is significantly larger than your big toe.
More common than the big toe.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Because I'm a big toe guy.
Also, don't quote me on that. It was some dumb article I clicked on once.
Yeah,
so
fair
it's
enough.
probably not true.
From the person who told me that Carrie Russell was Kurt Russell's daughter,
Yeah, and
I buy
like
that may not be real.
Kurt Russell was Bill Russell's son.
Well, today we're doing more creepypastas. You heard us earlier in the week or the week prior. I don't know when I'm releasing these. We'll see. We're going to each read a story. There are no prompts for these like there were last time. We just wrote them free of whatever restraints we might have had.
And that's what we normally have done. So
Yeah.
we're going back to our comfort zone
And
here.
as you found out last week, are our stories like creepypastas? Are they kind of bad? Or are they kind of good? Well, they're a little bit of everything.
A little bit of a mix. I would say ours are significantly better
I mean, they're
written.
top tier creepypasta, but as a story, we're not trying to write like this isn't F. Scott Fitzgerald quality stuff.
No, we
by
have
any
to
means.
make sure that there's a little bit of wily, silly stuff in there, or maybe a lot. Some of these stories might be that way. We don't know. We're going to
Or-
find out.
Might be totally serious like mine.
Yeah, this could be a real Bridges of Madison County. Is that serious? I've never seen it.
It is. It's a romance, right?
With Clint Eastwood.
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
So
He
know
does
that's
not
real.
play rowdy in that.
A thought that I just had in my head is I would like to necromance F. Scott Fitzgerald and make him do a creepypasta for this
That'd be
podcast.
great. I also have a lot of questions for that guy on his reclusive process.
Yeah, he's probably not the best person to glean like mental states from or anything like that, but we could get him to just write the one story and then put him back to wherever he went.
And our show, the Boob Tube Boys, of course, doesn't necessarily lend itself well to guests. It's a big reason why we haven't had guest hosts, just from the way we do things.
It's definitely the biggest reason we've never had anyone famous on. Only
But
that. Only
We've gotten offers. We just like, I don't think it will work, John Hamm.
But I will allow F. Scott Fitzgerald to come on the show
that would
if
be
he wants.
such a big get. Like, I can't even imagine who else would be that big of a deal.
Well, necromancy, maybe one of our stories will pertain to that. We'll find out. I'm going to be starting off here. I'll be reading Brian Vaughn's story. I don't know squat about this, much like always. We don't really read in advance each other's stories.
The point is to create a sense of who knows what'll happen next. I don't. I do on this one because I wrote it. But overall, I don't know how it'll work, though.
You know what I thought about but didn't do because I think it's a little too ambitious for the parameters of our time frame is I really think it'd be cool if we took on a choose your own adventure creepypasta
Ooh, yeah.
where we
Oh,
each
boy.
picked like a little path, but it would have been tough within our
Maybe one of these
hour-long-
years we are going to do that.
I think what we should do is write a choose your own adventure. I write up to the point of choose whatever, and you can go one of two ways. Brian writes one of the ways, Spencer writes the other way.
Love it.
We
Good one.
alternate.
Love it, love it, love it. We're going to do
That's
it.
pretty fantastic.
People actually do like these creepypasta episodes, which is the thing that I love. When we started doing these, I thought these were for us more than anything.
Right. But no, people enjoy them.
I'm really waiting for the first 5-star review to be like, love the creepypasta episodes.
Yeah, and by the way, Leave us a 5-star review on Amazon. We'll get a tattoo of a creepypasta.
Or a skeleton of some
On
sort.
Amazon? What are they doing that for? iTunes or Apple Podcasts?
Well, they could be buying some of our merch.
Well,
Or
we are for
Spotify.
sale on Amazon, of course.
You can give us star ratings on Spotify also, which we've been getting.
And I don't know, do they show up? I can never get that.
Yeah,
to
it shows up for me now. It didn't for a while.
Are they good ratings?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
3.
It's the same as everywhere. All 5 stars and one star.
That's that same person
Yeah.
going to all the platforms and be like, 1-star, Boob Tube Boys.
All right, let's get into this. Again, I have Brian's story here. Ooh, I can see after reading the title that this is right up my alley. It's called The Paleontologist 2. That's not right up my alley. No Bones About It, Part 1.
That's the subtitle of the sequel. Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah, it's The Paleontologist 2, No Bones About It, Part 1.
Oh, this is good. I'm excited that there are multiple parts of this, apparently.
I know it's kind of inconvenient having missed the original. This does not clarify that.
Anyone who grew up in or around Slaughter, East Virginia, knew all the stories about the paleontologist. And that's capital P. This is like a title, a proper noun of who this
Like
is.
maybe a bad guy, a serial killer.
They could tell you how he lost his mind when he lost his profession. They could tell you how now, years removed from the public eye, the paleontologist waits patiently in the night, how he was the one responsible for the grisly murders of a vacationing family 4 summers ago. They could tell you he was never caught. Tiffany with an I might add, and her boyfriend Scorch were not from Slaughter, East Virginia. Neither were Potty Mouth or Slinger. The 4 of them hadn't even heard of the place until midweek beers spurred talk of a weekend getaway to a secluded cabin. It was a Google search filtered by price range that brought them to Slaughter. It wasn't until Slinger conducted another Google search of his own on the drive down that the group found out about the paleontologist. It became all any of the college juniors could talk about, even as their SUV crunched down a gravel road that turned to dirt, even as they began to unpack inside the cabin. It's like the movie we just watched.
It is a lot like that.
So basically what you're saying is this is like 90% of horror movies?
Yeah. Dude, what if the paleontologist is into crypto? Slinger mused to Scorch as they each casually drank 2 Bud Lights at once. The 2 had been inseparable since discovering their mutual love of Tosh.0 in elementary school, not even their differences in social status. Scorch was a high school starting quarterback, while Slinger mostly huffed paint behind the bleachers, could break their bond.
Too bad Slinger's not the high school quarterback. He's got the arm. The slinger. I mean, he's slinging something.
But the irony would be as if he were the high school quarterback, but he was bad at, actually the running game.
He's just really good at calling the plays.
Yeah.
He's at the cerebral part down.
Slinger is, as you'll find out, is nothing if not cerebral.
That would be sick, man.
See?
Bro, I bet we could get him to play ultimate frisbee if he gets wasted enough, Scorch added muscularly. Potty Mouth was the first to express displeasure. I thought this was supposed to be a charming piece of shit, not like an actual piece of shit, she called out, folding her arms in a way that distorted the tattoo sleeves covering them. Did you guys not look past the first search result? She asked Tiffany and Scorch pointedly. Tiffany rolled her eyes. Much like her boyfriend Scorch and his less popular best friend Slinger, Tiffany and Potty Mouth had known each other for what felt like their whole lives. The difference was that theirs was a friendship of convenience, one that arose only because their mothers had been close a decade ago. We all have relationships like those, right?
You know, you gotta have friends around so you're not alone, and
Sure.
maybe you don't have the best options at first. Then later you meet people you can do podcasting with.
While there was a certain kind of familial love shared between them, Tiffany found herself exasperated by Potty Mouth's constant negativity. And why did she go and get all those tattoos? Why did she make her own life more difficult? Tiffany was baffled that Potty Mouth never figured out it was much easier to just be really blonde and obviously hot. Potts, this is like a whole vibe, Tiffany said, making it known that she didn't want the group's buzz mellowed by Potty Mouth's varied concerns. Camp, I get it, and I'll promise I'll chill the fuck out, but only if you answer the question, Potty Mouth said with a coy smile. Fine, no, we just clicked on the first one and sent the link to Mom to pay for it. Some of us have lives, Potts, Tiffany answered. To an outsider who didn't understand the dynamic, it might have looked like more of an argument than it was. Finished putting away his bongs and skateboard magazines, Slinger was ready to explore. Bros, he addressed the group, I'm gonna go see if I can find some mushrooms that'll get us fucked up, Slinger said as he moved towards the cabin door. Right on. I don't know their voices anymore.
That's okay.
I think that they're like that.
Okay, good enough. Right on, Scorch replied, turning his Barstool Sports cap around backwards and shotgunning another Bud Light up his nose. You want to maybe go with me, Potts? Slinger tentatively asked Potty Mouth. Slinger harbored a crush on Potty Mouth all through high school, and he found his attraction returning in this new environment. He loved everything about how much she hated him. I told you, Tiff is the only one allowed to call me that dipshit, Potty Mouth replied without looking up from an Instagram feed of black cats dressed in leather dusters. I'd like to see that. And no, not in a million fucking years. Slinger took the rejection in stride, as his whole life was essentially a series of rejections. First, there was Eagle Scouts. Then, there was After School Magic the Gathering Club. And eventually, it was Stoned Gamers of America, SGA, not the Screen Actors Guild. This is different. An organization he felt was tailor-made for his skill set. Bidding a quick later to his friends, Slinger rushed past the forest's edge just as the sun began to slide down the sky, leaving the dark promises of the night in its place. Having already eaten a half-dozen mushrooms that may or may not have been poisonous along the way, Slinger was starting to feel sick. He allowed his body to rest against a sturdy tree as he tried to figure out which way the cabin was and which halo was the best. He heard a rustling nearby and swiveled his head. Yo, is that you, Master Chief? Yo, just say something. A tall, black-haired figure appeared quickly before Slinger. The first thing Slinger noticed was how long and dopey the apparition's face was. The second thing, somehow, was the angry capuchin monkey perched on the figure's shoulder. Bro, you seem so familiar. You ever try to rob a GameStop maybe 3 years ago? Slinger asked, eager to reconnect with a lost acquaintance deep in the East Virginia wilderness. No, the figure answered coldly, but I sure could use a pal right now. It's just this thing with Rachel.
The paleontologist.
With a capuchin.
Yeah.
Okay,
I told you guys like weeks ago I thought Ross was a serial killer.
Let me redo this part of the story again. No, the figure answered
Much
coldly.
better.
But I sure could use a pal right now. It's just this thing with Rachel. Series of asterisks implying time change.
Or scene change.
Scene change, for sure. I don't even give a shit about Slinger, and I'm starting to get worried, Potty Mouth told Scorch and Tiffany back at the cabin. Chillax, Scorch said while chewing on the corner of a football. If I know Slinger, he's out there having the time of his life. I bet he's riding a deer or some shit. Fuck this, I'm gonna go look for him, Potty Mouth said, grabbing her jean jacket full of anti-establishment pins and patches as she headed out the door. Potts, if you'll give us a minute, 90 seconds at most, we'll come with. We just have to, do cabin sex first. You get it, right? There's an urban legend, we're in college, we're in the woods. This is the time to bang. Potty Mouth didn't wait for Tiffany's explanation, slipping out of the cabin and into the cool night air. She padded hesitantly into the woods, calling out for Slinger. Slinger, dude, what the fuck? Slinger, this isn't funny. When Potty Mouth thought she heard another voice besides her own, she quickly fell silent. What was this voice in the distance saying? She couldn't make out much beyond Central Perk and, I hope Chandler doesn't have sex with my sister. Potty Mouth moved closer to the voice, making sure to remain obscured by the sheer density of the trees the forest provided. Potty Mouth saw the vacant whites of Slinger's eyes and the bared teeth of what she swore was a monkey before everything went black. If Slinger or Potty Mouth were going to make it home alive, their only hope would be the friends they'd known their whole lives. Babe, which of Taylor's lyrics is your fave? Tiffany asked Scorch as she lay her head on his waxed chest, the two of them sharing a post-coital moment alone. You know I love them all, babe, Scorch said softly while thinking about cars that go fast. Do you think Potts and Slinger are okay? Tiffany asked, changing subjects on a dime. There's no cell service out here, so there's no way they can even watch any TikToks or Twitch streams. Do you know what that must feel like? Babe, trust me, they'll be back any minute. Or maybe they're totally getting it on, Scorch said, a perverted smile creeping across his square jaw. Ew, no way, Potts is better than that. But if you say they're okay, then I believe they're okay. Now seriously tell me, what's your fave Taylor lyric? Scorch was busy typing hateful missives on Twitter, paying no attention to anything Tiffany said, when he wondered if maybe they should bone again. Scorch and Tiffany were at an iPhone-themed bar a week later when they began... So, hold on. Let's think about this. I guess all the menu items are related to iPhones. Amazing. A week later, when they begin wondering when Potty Mouth and Slinger were coming home. That forest must be lit, babe, Scorch said. There's no way they aren't at least in a situationship now, not after this long together. I guess it's just so weird. Potts never goes this long without complaining about my impact on the environment, Tiffany replied as she snapped 700 photos of herself against the plain white backdrop of the iBar. Suddenly, Scorch erupted with excitement. Babe, have you seen this viral story about slaughter? Some shit must have went down right after we left. I kind of combined their voices.
Yeah. Well, they rub off on each other after living together. I assume they do.
Well, if you go to a different country and you're around those accents, they start to creep in your own voice. And when you're at the different country of the Apple bar. Some shit must have went down right after we left, Scorch exclaimed as he smeared his handsome face into his phone. No way, let me see. Tiffany pressed her body into Scorch's to get a better look at his phone. It says here that 2 college students, a man and a woman, were found dead in the woods by the cabin we stayed at. Whoa, this is so fucked up. What are the odds? Holy shit! The wounds on the victim seem consistent with a monkey attack? This shit is sick. Scorch continued to read aloud from his phone as he pumped his fist in the air. I can't wait to tell Potts about this. She is going to freak, Tiffany said as she detached from Scorch's phone, pulled out her own device, and began to take more photos of herself, never remembering to text Potty Mouth. Horrifying. He had a monkey.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, I buy David Schwimmer being out in the woods with his monkey, thinking about bones, boring children to death, and then they get bit by the monkey. 100% buy it.
I got a sense that after he lost that job in that Nude Man episode, it was a real slippery slope for him.
Yeah, it did imply at that time period of Friends that he was really unstable. His personality
Anything
was
could
not
have
good.
happened.
Yeah, absolutely. That is totally viable.
He had the anger issues, right?
Now, what do we think of these college students who are all wholly unlikable?
They are caricatures, but not really, of current people.
My absolute favorite line in the whole thing is how it's just a week later and they're just like, oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's no big deal
When
at
they
all.
get back.
And they never do put it together. At the end, no one ever understands that they got murdered.
How long have you had the idea of writing a creepypasta about Ross being a killer in your head?
Very early. I think I even said it in one of our episodes, that I already had one of my ideas. And the idea was only that it would involve Ross as a killer.
Sure.
That was it.
And then you wanted to hit on tropes. And,
just
and
do
stuff like that.
do a traditional kids in a cabin thing.
Yeah.
But with Ross, and where everyone's a vapid modern person.
I so wish that we had the time in the story to be able to go into the paleontologist backstory.
Yes.
That's a
I
fascinating character.
I could have done this a lot. It was a slippery slope in this regard, too, in that this would have been very fun to make 8,000 words.
Sure.
Yeah.
And go back into the paleontologist thing without trying to reveal that it's Ross until the right time.
But it really sets it up. This is a Star Wars episode 4 thing. Like we get Darth Vader.
Yes, this
How
is
did
just
you
like
become
that.
Darth
Thank you,
Vader?
Van.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to figure that out,
The paleontologist.
And you thought Ross was the final form for David Schwimmer. That's a famous character, but no, Forrest Ross. Even better.
Spooky. He's covered in moss.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I have to say about both of the stories you wrote is in both cases when they ended, I was like, shit, that worked perfectly and I wanted more. Both times I was like, I'm ready to find out more information, but I can see exactly why, and that's all we have to do.
That's a tale of a good story writer right there.
Because this one in particular, I, for some reason, felt I wanted to make more jokes of them not getting it. But my thought was that kind of takes away the impact of them just being so empty-headed
and then
careless.
I mean, it just ends on immediately forgetting to
Never
do what
even
she said she was going to do.
Yeah, which the texting her is stupid anyway. She's dead.
All right, you're up next, Brian. You're reading Spencer's story here.
Yes. This story is called The New Deal for the Undead. It was a cold, wet day in America's capital. With spring still a few weeks away, the chill in the air persisted stubbornly. A great fog enveloped the region, and steady raindrops plopped on their heads, and umbrellas of any passers-by too busy to stay tucked away indoors. Some say it was an ominous day, probably the most ominous day of 1933 to that point, but others waved that suggestion away dismissively, decrying it as revisionist history. Ominous or not, history was indeed about to be made. Hundreds of patriotic Americans were gathered together at the east portico of the Capitol building, bunched in tightly to watch their new president introduce himself.
So what year is this again?
1933.
So this is his first election.
This is a piece of historical fiction.
I like the idea of the inauguration being the president introduces himself. Hi.
Hey guys, you may not know of me.
He has one of those little "my name is" name tags on, the sticky ones.
And look at me. Here I am standing up. That's not going to last.
Oh.
I actually did look at pictures to make sure that he's standing behind the podium.
Yeah, but he always stood up.
I think he could do that.
Rights.
The rights of the everyman, Brian.
Yeah. A perfect mixture of tension and anticipation filled the air, spreading among the attendants like a virus. They were sick of Herbert Hoover, sick of food lines, and sick of speakeasies, having all spent the entire last decade in them to skirt the absurdities of prohibition. The nation needed a new face to lead them to better times. Even now, that new face loomed above them behind a podium. It was a dapper gentleman, firmly in his middle-aged years, but already showing the signs of approaching elderly status. His hair was frosted with white, the lines on his face serving as a map of his past trials. That's awesome. The crowd found this comforting. This was a battle-hardened man, and he had the wisdom to guide them to the light. As he cleared his throat to begin speaking, the crowd seemed to cheer. Dozens waved their pointy, surprisingly sharp miniature American flags and shouted, FDR! 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 So first of all, called out the wise, newly anointed president to the crowd, who quickly quieted down for their leader. He was surrounded on all sides by his entourage. Burly Secret Servicemen stood at the ready. Proud speechwriters hoped everyone would know all the best lines were theirs, and all the other people presidents need. Maybe some cabinet members, a secretary or two, crowded in to make their presence known. The president had paused dramatically to give the crowd a chance to hush. Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Goosebumps ran down the length of every body in attendance. No one had ever thought of it that way. It made so much sense, and in that context, it had never felt easier to be brave. Smiles appeared on every face in attendance. And zombies! Screamed the suddenly alarmed president, immediately snuffing out the crowd's hope like a pinched flame of a candle.
I swear to you, when you started this story, I was like, there better be a take on the nothing to fear but fear itself. And you delivered, Spencer. Good job.
Okay, on 3-8, we all have to yell zombies. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Zombies! Everyone shouted at once, turning in a blind panic to look around the area. It was too late. With the crowd smashed in together so tightly, there was no hope to flee to safety without creating a stampede. Most attendants helplessly slammed into each other as they tried to escape, while the few on the perimeter were able to confirm what the president had called out in his inaugural address.
Wait, so let me clarify. Are there zombies here, or is he just rile them up because they're dumb?
No, there's
Let's-
zombies.
So they're actually
I'll
there.
read the next
Okay.
sentence so cleared up. There were zombies, all right. A whole horde of them moaning and shuffling in numbers too large to count, and many of them had already infiltrated the crowd. Screams filled the area, some of which were silenced once their brains had become zombie food. Behind the podium, FDR surveyed the horror in front of him with the calm of a seasoned war general. We knew this could happen, men, he boomed at his security force. Get out there and save your fellow Americans. I'm from upstate New York and grew up with money, so I probably talked like this. But, sir, demanded the head of the Secret Service,
Who doesn't have a name. By the way, it's just the head of Secret Service.
You'll be defenseless. Let some of us stay and help you out of here.
I trust this man with a voice like that.
You'll do as you're told, FDR roared, standing proudly and without difficulty. Though paralyzed from the waist down, his ailments always subsided in the face of danger. With the adrenaline flowing, he could walk as well as any man. Better, even.
I didn't know how much I could do there without being offensive, but I tried.
It's good.
It's historical
You
fiction.
walked even better. You were the best walker.
Imagine this guy in a mall. I can, actually. Like, FDR mall walking is visually right.
Yeah, he'd be a window shopper too.
Yeah. Oh, this corset looks appealing. I should get it for Eleanor.
The hottest of the presidential wives.
I think they make an appropriate couple.
Eleanor has a pretty decent role in this. It's not huge, but she comes.
Okay, good.
She comes in.
The frazzled security staff waded into the panicked crowd. Several were eaten immediately as more and more new zombies rose from the dead. This is a bloodbath, FDR mused to himself. Everyone, get safely in the White House, he shouted at his remaining entourage. Turning to the First Lady, his voice grew soft. Eleanor, my dear, we've spoken of this moment our whole time together. If I don't make it, know that I have no regrets. Let me stay and fight with you, Frankie,
That's pretty good.
Eleanor pleaded.
Oh man, I'm crying already. All these voices Brian is doing for this is really killing me.
There's no time. They may reach the White House next. Go to the kitchen and get the ceremonial zombie cleaver. It's our only hope. What will you do? The First Lady asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Something I should have done a long time ago, FDR said, his tone hushed but firm. He pulled out 4 rings from his pocket, slipping one on his right ring finger. What do you mean you should have done it a long time ago? That doesn't make any sense, Eleanor said. If you'd done it a long time ago, the zombies wouldn't have even been here, and this is clearly a thing you're doing just to defeat the zombies. I've always wanted to say that, FDR shouted, the heat visible on his cheeks. If you're done humiliating me, get to the White House and find the ceremonial zombie cleaver. Eleanor complied, gathering the remaining entourage and leading them away. Something I should have done a long time ago, she giggled to herself. Meanwhile, FDR's magic ring grew increasingly shiny and blue on his ring finger. With this ring, I have the power of water, he shouted, now alone on the stage. The screams of dying men and women continued to fill the air around him. The other rings, one green, one red, and one a shockingly nasty brown, began to glow just as brightly as his own. Suddenly, a man appeared opposite FDR, fully attired in his Sunday best, top hat and all. He had sandy brown hair, a monocle, and a bristly mustache.
There it is.
FDR, he screamed in a happy greeting. You son of a bitch, why you summon me? There's no time for pleasantries, Teddy, shouted FDR. He handed him the green ring. We've got zombies on the loose. Zombies? Bellowed Teddy Roosevelt. They must be stopped. They'll destroy the national parks.
Oh, that's good. I also buy that Teddy Roosevelt would fight zombies.
Oh,
100%.
absolutely. He'd
would.
fight anything.
Mhm.
They'll destroy much more than that, FDR agreed, his face grave, almost ashen. They'll destroy the very fabric of mankind. But Teddy was already gone, wading into the crowd of zombies. With this ring, I have the power of Earth, he shouted from a distance. A pair of rocks in the shape of boxing gloves formed on his fists, and he quickly laced them up with practiced motions and got to punching. Several zombie heads fell off from the force of the blows, continuing to moan even after being separated from their zombie shoulders. Near FDR, another man materialized. He was a gangly bastard, all arms and legs, an incredible chin-strap beard, and a stove hat. Jesus, Abe, why are you so goddamn tall? FDR greeted the man, not unkindly. His eyes twinkled with warmth, and he patted the man on the back as he handed him the red ring. Play it cool, Daddy-O, Abraham Lincoln said with a smile. He put on his ring immediately, all business. With this ring, I have the power of fire. He turned back to FDR. What's the situation?
He's just ready to fight.
FDR admired Teddy for his boldness, but privately felt a much greater kinship with Abe and his professionalism. And he would never admit it out loud, but he wasn't really all that into the national parks. The outdoor lifestyle didn't really suit him at all. We've got zombies, Abe, lots of them. We can't let this happen, not on my watch. Oh, no, Abe cried. A man without a brain is nothing more than an undead slave. And you know how I feel about slavery, FDR. Yeah, 7 years and all that. My presidency will have plenty of achievements, too, if we don't get overrun by these goddamned undead. Go burn some zombie ass! On it, Abe said. Those zombies are a bunch of uncool squares anyway. His eyes grew bright red to match the ring, and flames erupted from all 10 of his fingers. As he approached the zombie horde, dozens of them melted away into ash on the spot. FDR took a moment to wonder why Abraham Lincoln was acting like a beatnik, and a few more moments to wonder what a beatnik was. Then he shook himself out of the reverie and prepared the final ring. Another man appeared, quiet and stoic, but bursting with authority and fearlessness, without having to utter a word. He kept his expression blank to hide the wooden teeth he was secretly self-conscious about. "I cannot tell a lie," the man announced, seemingly to no one at all. Confused, FDR ignored what he assumed was an unusual greeting and handed him the final ring, the brown one to match his teeth. "We've got zombies, George. We need your help." George Washington seemed to puff up a little at the news.
We shall eradicate them to the very man, if that is indeed what they can be called,
he declared, and despite himself, FDR's heart leapt at the words. FDR didn't understand his feelings towards George. While Teddy felt like a rowdy cousin you can handle fine in small doses, and Abe felt like a close friend and lifelong companion, George was something else entirely. You wanted to impress George, but there was no getting close to him. He was so cold and distant, yet every time you needed something done, you knew he was the man for the job.
I like how he talks like Horace from Dr. Quinn.
That is this highly respected guy.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of Teddy. I was like, no, I'm going to go against character in this, I guess. Every time George left a room, every man would think to himself, there goes the finest man to ever live.
FDR,
George scolded the president.
I need the ring.
Shaken by his inaction, FDR mumbled an excuse and handed George his ugly brown ring. The ugliness was not lost on George, who accepted the ring with a grimace.
How'd I end up with this fucking thing anyway?
Do you think George Washington ever said fuck?
I doubt it.
I bet he did at least once.
Unless he
hope
was
so.
wasn't the official meaning already in use by that point?
I'm assuming so, but I don't know.
What if he's singing along to Fuck the Police? It was the last one left when we formed this crew, FDR shrugged. He found he couldn't quite meet George's piercing gaze. Sighing, George put the ring on.
With this ring, I have the power of air.
Both men stood still for a moment, neither sure how to proceed. In the distance, Teddy was covered in zombie blood, sweaty from the exertion of punching off countless zombie heads. He continued to fight on bravely. He fought back to back with gangly beatnik Abe, whose flame fingers continued to melt away the zombies in front of him. The air took on a horrible smell of rotting, charred flesh.
You know, my ring doesn't even have power, right?
George asked, breaking the silence.
Teddy's over there smashing skulls in with his rock hands. Abe's a human inferno. Somehow I'm supposed to harness oxygen as a weapon. This is bullshit, Frank.
FDR's face reddened. We've been over this, George. You're really more of a moral support guy. There's no finer leader in the land.
To hell with your moral support,
George snapped.
Couldn't you at least have raided the armory and equipped me with a musket or a cannon?
FDR snickered as quietly as he could.
We don't use muskets, George. This is the 30s. I don't see you knowing your way around a Tommy gun, bro.
Now it was George's turn to redden.
This is why Thomas Jefferson is the fourth man on Rushmore and not you,
he hissed, stomping angrily down the steps and into the crowd. As the zombies came at him, he tore them apart with his bare hands, snapping their necks left and right and biting through their heads with his strong wooden teeth. Finally, he got hold of a blood-stained miniature American flag dropped by one of the victims as his brains were devoured and launched into an impressive impaling spree. Zombie bodies piled up next to the embittered first president. God damn you, George, FDR whispered to himself as he watched the man go about his business. Why do you always have to make everything look so cool? As the trio of heroes slowly whittled the zombie army down to more manageable numbers, FDR knew it was time he himself entered the fray. As if sensing this along with him, his feet jets suddenly activated, and he shot 100 feet into the air, riding the momentum into the thick of battle. From above, he had the perfect view of the entire battlefield. Teddy, Abe, and George had the zombies almost completely destroyed to the east, but an entire wave of them had formed behind them from the west. Without assistance, they would soon be trapped, having no choice but to fight their way through. FDR couldn't let that happen. He blasted the oncoming horde with the full power of his feet jets, spraying the zombies with the force of a tidal wave. The water hit them straight on, killing many of them on impact and sending the rest hurtling through the air. Oops, FDR said to himself. The zombies were definitely taken care of, but he'd gotten a little carried away with his feet jets, and the tidal wave he'd created immediately destroyed several buildings behind the undead army.
I'm sure those buildings were full of zombies anyway, he rationalized out loud. Foul creatures be damned!
As his feet jets deactivated, he slowly returned to the ground, landing gently next to Teddy, Abe, and George. They were no worse for the wear, although none of them could be seen very well underneath all that zombie blood. FDR shot a little foot jet water at them to help clean them off.
That's sweet.
And gross.
Disgusting. I don't know that I'd want to be hit by anybody's feet water.
No, it's sweat, right?
If anyone's going to shoot me with foot water, it'll be FDR. That's fine.
Some noble sweat.
Sure.
Well, man, another mission accomplished,
George said, going into his military leader pose and pacing back and forth like a peacock.
We've saved the world again, but none of us can rest easy. It's only a matter of time before they try this again.
There were general rumblings of agreement among the other presidents.
I might suggest this is more of a one-time freak thing, FDR said,
with as much diplomacy as he could muster. George glared at him.
But George is right, FDR said quickly. This won't be the last time our little group is needed. These are dark days. The world is a chaotic place, and we will never truly be safe.
Well, I can stay, volunteered Teddy, who seemed even more energized than when he'd first materialized.
Put me in Yellowstone. I can be a permanent park ranger.
Teddy, that is a positively ghastly idea. Who would want to go to a park with a dead phantom president keeping watch over it? FDR questioned him.
The fuck's Yellowstone?
George asked. No one answered him.
You know you can stay, men. The ring grants us our powers based on an emergency basis only. I will keep them safe for you, and God forbid if you are needed, I shall call for you again.
George went first. Ripping his ring off wordlessly, he pressed it into FDR's outstretched hand. There was a definite air of resentment in his eyes. His body disappeared into a mist.
Typical George, Abe said with a laugh. He was never much for goodbyes.
He slowly removed his ring, looking at it in wonder.
I could have used this thing on that April day in 1865, you know,
he mused. Teddy and FDR looked away awkwardly.
Hey, Franklin, where's your big squeeze?
He asked. He held the ring just over FDR's hand, almost dangling it.
Oh, Eleanor? FDR chuckled. I wanted to keep her safe, so I sent her and the cabinet to the White House. I told her to grab the ceremonial zombie cleaver in the kitchen.
Well, that was smart, Teddy interjected.
If there are any undead remaining, that could be just the thing to put a stop to them once and for all. There is no ceremonial zombie cleaver, FDR said. I made it up to ensure she'd actually do as I told her. That woman would have been out here fighting with the zombies with us otherwise.
Yeah, I buy that.
I do too. Strong, powerful woman.
You dog,
Abe said as he dropped the ring. He was still laughing as he disappeared, his voice bouncing all around them in a quiet echo.
Until next time, Teddy,
FDR said, holding out his hand pointedly.
Now, FDR, is that any way to speak to your fifth cousin? You're not getting into Yellowstone, Ted,
FDR said, his voice firm.
I'll box your ears,
Teddy said, losing his temper. He made no attempt to take his ring off. Impatient, FDR reached out and grabbed at his hand, trying to pry the ring off. The two men grappled at each other briefly, shoving and slapping at the other until they came to their senses.
Fine, I'll go, screamed Teddy. If you happen to see any more zombies in one of the parks, though,
I'll summon you right away, FDR said, ripping the ring off Teddy's finger. He disappeared just as quickly as the ring left his finger, leaving FDR alone with a pile of zombie and human corpses. The magnitude of the moment swept over him as he took everything in. He said a silent prayer for all the victims as the wind tousled his white hair. Slowly, his joints already aching as the adrenaline flooded from his body, he made his way to the White House and to Eleanor. There would be a lot of rebuilding to do. Thousands were dead, the public would be traumatized, and several buildings had been destroyed by his foot jets. But he knew the American people would prevail.
This has to be the most ominous weather of 1933 so far, he said to himself,
as he stepped through the corpses purposefully, his spirit holding steady despite the carnage and the biting wind. He nearly tripped over one of his former security men. Dead, of course, no brains left at all. Exhausted, he couldn't help but giggle at the absurdity of the whole thing. "First order of business," he said aloud to himself. "Replace the entire Secret Service with brainless idiots so we're better prepared for a zombie attack in the future." He chuckled to himself as he walked. Then he started outright laughing. "Ha ha ha, you've done it again." By the time he left the pile of corpses completely behind, FDR was guffawing.
You know what, though?
The end.
I totally buy that if there's a president who's going to form a team and share the responsibility of fighting off a bunch of zombies, it's FDR, one of the most socialist presidents we've had.
I think they all carried out their roles as they would.
I did not know his New Deal involved rings of power, though.
I also, I didn't know that Abe Lincoln had that sort of dark poet streak in him.
A little bit of a beatnik streak, sure.
Yeah, but he does, and he just never got a chance to let it out. He didn't live long enough.
I mean, it totally makes sense. Spencer, how did this happen?
Actually, the whole thing stemmed from just, to me, the line of "the only thing we have to fear is fear itself" is so stupid. I've always hated that inaugural address, so I thought it'd be great if he added, "well, and zombies" at the end of that. That was my first thought. And then the whole story sprang from that. And it was supposed to be just like 1,000 words, throwaway, get it done, and write my more important thing. And then when I started introducing the other presidents, I was like, well, I gotta keep going with this.
You definitely had to. That was extremely fun.
Here's the thing, though. He's got 3 more inaugurations coming up. 3 more zombie
There could
attacks.
be sequels for sure.
If not zombies, then what?
Something else. The concept there that's the New Deal for the zombies, I guess, was their slaughter. I guess that was his plan for that. Also, that would be a really memorable inauguration.
The most memorable one.
Do you remember when FDR did his inauguration and zombies
You wouldn't
came?
be able to top it. Like, anybody going in next, you're like, well, he's not going to have zombies. And he's not going to, recall dead presidents to wear power rings. So, what are we even doing having another inauguration after this one?
You know what? I have a bone to pick, though, because you missed an opportunity here to give him the fire ring, which would play into his fireside chats pretty well.
I honestly was just reaching wildly for the colors, and then at
Dirty brown.
the last thing was the George Washington one and how it was pointless. Just air.
Were there any presidents you thought about doing but did not do?
Yes, I was going to have him do a relatively modern one that never accomplished anything and have them be like, "who are you?" They're just not know, I don't know, Jimmy Carter or something like that. One of the obvious ones. But yeah, and I thought about doing one of the other modern ones that was just bad. That
Right.
maybe had zero impact and they'd make fun of him.
Put George W. Bush in there or something to have him bumble around.
I wanted them to say more about the Thomas Jefferson thing because he was the one in the Mount Rushmore that didn't come and they all just hate him. They just think he's a piece of shit, so they wouldn't let him be in. And I guess the sort of Captain Planet Mount Rushmore.
That's
that
exactly how
here.
I was thinking of it, as FDR as Captain Planet and color photography. He might have had a green mullet at some point. But,
we don't know.
Yeah.
I guess that's what I was drawing influence from with the rings. What is that from? Is that in anything else? Where
I
it's
feel
elements?
like it's probably in some other sorts of sci-fi type things.
But yeah, Captain America's the big one, though, I think. I think that fits the most with it.
I didn't look up any specifics, so I just went off of what was in my head with the whole 4 elements and getting power from it. So I don't know how that got in my brain that way, but that's what came out.
And then they find the 5th ring, which belongs to Franklin Pierce.
There is really, honestly, a lot of opportunity for that. And at first, I wanted Eleanor's role to be bigger. I wanted her to actually have a cleaver and then be like, "has anyone seen Eleanor?" And then she's just got a pile of corpses around her and she's been murdering everyone.
She's twirling with the cleaver outstretched, just lopping off zombie parts.
I wanted her to do that and for them to be like, "Jesus, Eleanor, how many zombies did you kill?" And it to be 1,000 or something all by herself.
You know, there's that fake NASCAR movie with Will Ferrell. What's it called?
Talladega Nights.
No, yeah, that's the one. And it's really not that bad. It has its moments. But
I saw it when it came out. I haven't seen it since.
The very beginning of it features a quote, and it says something like, "All I need in life is speed, hot, nasty, badass speed." And then it says, Eleanor Roosevelt. And that joke landed for me. I loved that one.
Might have been a real quote.
The one thing that I put in there that was very small line was when I mentioned the flags being really sharp and small at the beginning. I wanted to set that up for George to pick up later when he needed something because he didn't have any ability.
And those were what those little dumb flags were that they waved around. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I didn't even know if they ever had that at that
They looked
time
like
period.
those little pennant. I don't know if it was then, but you see those footage footage of events like that, and people, I know there are a lot of people like this now, but everyone was just like, holy shit, yeah, America.
And a thing that I can hold.
Yeah, and I can go to.
There wasn't to do with
much.
the time period, so it was like I've got something in my hand, and that's pretty great.
Yeah, I'm somewhere with something.
Life is great.
So that was real weird. I know.
Yeah, it was great.
That was a strange creation that came out there.
I would deign that it is fantastic, which is a thumbs up from me.
It's your highest rating on the website. We have a whole scale.
It's the Patrick Duffy scale of attractiveness.
Yeah.
But the fantastic is at the top. All right, we have one more story. This one is courtesy of me. I wrote it. Spencer's going to read it. Take it away.
Let's see what we've got here. I have had it face down because I didn't want to spoil anything.
And I again did like the worst title I could find or think of.
I should preface this by saying that in the past few years, my stories have always been innocent at the beginning and they turn into Star Wars erotica.
And these are the van stories that you've been forced to read in previous editions of Creepypasta.
Well, I mean, the first time around, we had Watto and Anakin.
Mm-hmm.
and what happened in that one? I forget.
They banged.
What was last year?
The last one was Palpatine
And Yoda.
What happened at the end of that one?
They banged.
Mm,
And
A
there
lot.
was Yoda come everywhere.
it's green, I think.
So yeah, listeners
Coming
out
back
there,
to me, just as the coming he was doing. I don't know what.
if you're offended by sex stuff, don't go listen to those last two episodes because those are pretty rough.
But if you're into it, I would.
If you're into it, yeah, stick with them. So anyway, this year was a little different because we had the prompt, so I took things a little bit differently.
This one is called A Scoundrel's Tale. Pete Lightning, boy architect, the man said with a disgusted tone. You're clearly more resourceful than I thought. The tall man's wispy mustache billowed in the wind as he stood atop the roof of the cleverly designed building. Progress on the structure was going slow, much to the man's annoyance. He had commissioned the property with one goal in mind: murder. Pete gulped heavily. He knew this confrontation was coming, but he also knows he's not a fighter. In fact, he's merely a skilled architect, despite being a boy of just 14. He designed all the best buildings in downtown San Francisco, including the Flapjack House, Rubens Rise, and the Bastard Manor. He could whip up a blueprint faster than you can say his catchmark phrase, "Good gravy, Miss Maisie." But he was no brawler. I knew exactly where to find you, Dell, the boy said in a shaky voice. You see, you may have thought you hid your plans well, but all it took was one look at those blueprints, and I knew what you were planning. Pete's voice grew steadier by the word. The man recoiled in disgust. Dell? You dare speak to me so formally. Do not claim to know me, boy, and call me by my last name. Call me Mr. Lerius.
What's his name?
I believe it's Delirious.
Yeah, that's the one.
Is that supposed to mean something?
Nope.
Okay.
Upon saying this, Lerius threw his cape back, revealing a mysterious device in his left hand. Pete knew to be on his toes, but was unsure of what would come next. With a grandiose laugh, the old man pointed towards the night sky. You're too late to stop me, he said. Now behold, my greatest creation. No, screamed Pete, but it was too late. Lerius pressed a big red button on his device, and suddenly the ground far below them began to clang and shift. At once, a massive chasm opened in the earth, and a tall metal rectangle burst toward the heavens. The building Pete and Lerius were standing on shook and trembled. Not a bad structural design, Pete thought to himself. But if I designed this building, it would have far greater stability.
He's an architect, you see.
Yeah.
Pete Lightning Boy architect.
Look, he's kind of a wonderkin.
He really is at 14, all those buildings. Upon reaching high into the sky, the tower screeched to a stop. The very top of it then began to unfurl. the very top of it then began to unfurl, with metal plates spreading out to all sides and forming a sort of bowl above Pete. He watched in horror as it eventually spread out miles in each direction, blotting out the moon and trapping all of Eagle Hat, Canada beneath its shiny steel basin. Lerius began to cackle. You see, my boy, there's nothing you can do to stop me, the nefarious man said between chortles. With my new structure, I'll be able to collect all of the rainwater and sell it to the town at dastardly prices. I'll be richer than Steve Ballmer, who comes in at number 10 on Forbes' top 40 richest people in the world. He pursed his lips together in anger, his hands tightening into fists. You may think you've won, Lerius, he said through gritted teeth, but you forgot about one thing. Ho ho, chuckled the older man. And what might that be? Pete's stance softened and he smiled. Your hubris didn't allow you to focus on what matters most. Structural integrity. Pete pointed towards the top of the massive domed building.
Pete is nothing if not consistent. He's mentioned structural integrity multiple times.
I think that might be all he thinks about. Those cornices may look nice, and those parapets do allow for your men up top to set up a good defensive perimeter, but you seem to have forgotten that the tide affects the soil in this region 0.001% more than closer to the equator. And as I recall, Pete looked up at the dome, it's a full moon tonight. Lyria's face dropped.
His moons and tides and
Right.
Water.
This is all architects know this stuff.
To his horror, the ground below began to groan menacingly. He looked at Pete's face, which now had an ear-to-ear grin, and he pointed at him. You lie, boy architect. You and your protractor are nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah, I'd like to see him draw a perfect circle.
Just then, the giant structure let out an ear-splitting bellow as the ground near its base crumbled, causing the structure to bend and then break at the joint. Pete quickly ducked for cover behind a nearby mansard roof, surrounding a rotunda. He turned back to look at Lyrius just as a massive end trabeated? Is that right?
Sure. I'm no architect.
Just as a massive end of trabeated arch came hurtling towards the man. This won't be the last you see of me, boy architect. I'll see you in... Lyrius couldn't finish what he was saying before being crushed beneath the support beam from the arch. A piece of latticework came to a thud atop the pile. Several pieces broke off, leaving behind a cross shape marking the gravesite.
Convenient.
Boom! Chewbacca was abruptly pulled from his book about a brilliant boy architect from a galaxy far, far away. Roar! Roared the mighty Wookiee inquisitively. Or I guess that's more of a question. He could hear Han shout something from the cockpit of the vaunted Millennium Falcon, but he couldn't tell what it was. He waited a second before Han screamed clear as day, Chewie, get up here! We've got company! So he leapt into action, his strong, hairy legs carrying him into the cockpit in nearly an instant. Upon looking out the window, he could see just what it was that rocked their ship. It was a heavily modified Jumpmaster 5000 starship, which Chewie knew could belong to only one person. Dingar! Chewbacca snarled. Han's eyes widened. That's Dingar's ship, the punishing one? The smuggler said, with fear in his voice.
The man knows what to name a ship. Man.
And you better strap yourself in, pal. We've got a hell of a fight on our hands. As Chewbacca settled into his familiar co-pilot position, the radiocom began to beep, indicating that the Falcon had received a message. Chewie and Hans's eyes met, and without saying a word, Han pushed the receive button. Han Solo and Chewbacca, the voice of the notoriously dirty bounty hunter rang out. You boys have got quite the price on your heads. Now, Dingar, there's no reason to get crazy here, Han said, his voice brimming with confidence. Whatever you're being paid, I can match. Surely we can come to an agreement? It'll be like old times in Coruscant, huh, buddy? Dingar's laugh echoed through the cockpit. Ha 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 ha. We're long past that point, Solo. I just wanted to tell you I'm going to enjoy this, because you're about to take a dirt nap.
Oh, man, I love that phrase.
That's what he says. He's voiced by Simon Pegg in the Battlefront game, and he says, you're about to take a dirt nap.
I bet he had fun doing that.
Oh, yeah.
Suddenly, a blast fired from the Punishing One's main laser cannon, which nearly took off the port gun assembly. Solo launched the Falcon into gear, and the ship lurched its way forward, far quicker than her looks might imply. Chewie, how are the shields looking? Any chance we can make it through this? The captain said, unsure of what the answer might be. Chewbacca growled back at his partner. That old trick? You really think you won't expect that? All right, then, reroute all power to the forward shields. The confidence was back in Hans's voice as he expertly weaved and avoided all of his adversary's shots. Okay, pal, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. As he said the word, Han and Chewie executed a maneuver that a lesser duo would never have timed correctly. But 13 of the best years swindling their way through the galaxy together made it as if they were the same body, operating different limbs. Han cut the Falcon's primary and secondary engines, while Chewie rerouted all extra power to the starboard docking engine, which caused the ship to quickly and abruptly flip directions. Once Han got his target in his sights, he reversed the process, and the Falcon began screaming towards the Punishing One with frontal shields at full. A lesser hunter would have been turned into space scrap before even seeing what happened, But Dingar was no rookie. He quickly engaged his tertiary thrusters, and the punishing one lurched quickly to avoid the oncoming Falcon. Dingar almost got away from it too, but he just wasn't quick enough, and his port landing gear rig banged into the Falcon's shield barrier, and suddenly his ship was spiraling violently out of control. Han took the opportunity to engage the hyperdrive of his trusty ship, and before Dingar could even see what happened, the scoundrel Han Solo and all the credits that would have come with capturing him was gone. Dingar smashed his fists into his control panel and let out an exasperated, "Hoodoo!"
That's a real Star Wars insult, by the way.
You'll hear a lot of Bantha Poodoo.
Mm-hmm. It basically means shit, but not as mean, but still as mean.
Traveling through hyperspace and having dodged a major bullet, Han and Chewie went back to check on their passengers, with the Wookiee checking in on the two droids and Han visiting with Rebel Officer Organa. As the smuggler entered the former princess's chambers, he felt a rush of emotions. It just hit him that he was less worried for his own safety than he was hers. "What was that all about?" the stubborn woman demanded, her concerned eyes belying her rigid, angry tone. "Nothing to worry about, Your Highness. We just ran into an old friend who wanted to say hello," Han sarcastically commented. As Leia took a step towards him, she accidentally tripped over a fallen canister, no doubt knocked free during the fight. She stumbled forward only to find herself caught in the strong arms of the handsome smuggler. "Whoa there, slow down, Your Highness. You might hurt yourself. We wouldn't want that now, would we?" Han seductively said as he held the decorated rebel tightly and closely. "After all, we've got unfinished business, don't we?" Han looked deep into Leia's eyes and she into his. He pulled her even tighter and closer. He could feel the anticipation surging within him, but suddenly she averted her gaze and pulled away. "I'm fine, thank you," she blurted out. She took a moment to steady herself, and suddenly the softness that had been creeping into her was excised, her look becoming steely and firm, the look of a woman who has been through hell and back. She glanced back at Solo and said, "Now I'd appreciate it if you would get this hunk of junk under control and get us back to the rebel base. I need to prepare my report for General Madine, so excuse me." Han could barely blink before Leia had shoved him out of his quarters, and he felt all his emotions come crashing back down. "She'll come around eventually. I know she will," he thought to himself as he went back to the cockpit. Star, 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 star. That evening, after setting her out to get back to the rebel base, the passengers aboard the Millennium Falcon settled into their respective cabins to try and get some sleep. Han was tired. After all, a fight with one of the galaxy's most notorious bounty hunters will do that to you. As he lay there trying to drift off to sleep, his mind turned to the princess. Han admired her strength, was captivated by her beauty, and was turned on by her confidence. He thought about the way she tosses her hair to the side when it comes undone and how her brow furrows and her nose wrinkles when he teases her. After a long time thinking only of Leia, he said out loud to himself, "Am I really falling for a princess of all people?" He felt a stirring within his loins, but he pushed down his emotions and rolled onto his side to go to sleep. But no sooner than he had begun to nod off that suddenly the door to his compartment whooshed open. "Princess," Han said as he sat awake abruptly.
I had a feeling.
Came a hushed growl from his friend Chewbacca. He sighed and relaxed a bit. "Oh, you had a bad dream, huh? Well, come on and sit down. Let's talk about it." The giant Wookiee happily bounced over to Han's bed and flopped down, immediately growling his story to his friend and confidant. "It's okay, pal. It's just a dream. I promise it'll take more than that scuzzball Dingar to take me down. Your bad dream will never come true, I promise." As he said this, Han patted his friend on the hand, and then let out a big yawn. "All right, now I need to get some sleep, Chewie. Go back to bed." Chewbacca asked softly.
Almost Tim Allen.
Yeah, it's too close for my liking. Han sighed. "Fine, you can sleep here tonight, but if you start talking in your sleep, I'm kicking you out."
I wouldn't worry about the talking.
The two curled up on Hans's bed, and despite the size difference, Chewie snuggled up in Han's arms like a happily content loth cat, and the two drifted off to sleep. That night, Chewbacca once again had a terrible dream. This time it wasn't Dingar chasing the Millennium Falcon. It was an entire group of hunters. 4-LOM and Zuckuss had hunted Han, Chewie, and the others to a shady backwater planet, but the crew managed to narrowly escape the two notorious bounty hunters. But as soon as our heroes managed to find freedom, the deadly assassin droid IG-88 had come upon them. A tense battle ensued, and just before they were about to get away yet again, Han was hit square in the chest by a blast from the Trandoshan Hunter Bosk's Relby V10 blaster rifle. Dream Chewbacca held his friend Han in his arms as the smuggler looked him in the eyes and took his last breath. This caused Chewie to awaken in terror. But before he belted out a mighty roar, he caught himself, realizing he might get kicked out for waking up his friend. The Wookiee finally settled a bit, but struggled to fall back asleep, so he continued to fidget and adjust in Han's arms. A dead asleep Han was not dreaming about bounty hunters. No, his slumber was filled with stories of the future he and Leia Organa might have together. A romantic kiss in a dream, as well as Chewie's physical fidgeting, caused an involuntary surge within Han Solo, and before he could even wake, he was rock hard and erect. Chewie could feel the smuggler's manhood in his back, of course, and for a brief moment it merely gave the 7.5-foot-tall Wookiee a bit of a laugh. Of course, the added motion of Chewbacca's laughter caused the still asleep Han to involuntarily grind against his closest friend. Chewie tried to ignore it, but he couldn't sleep, and the harder he tried not to think about it, the more he thought about it. For long, he too was aroused, and there was nothing he could do to shake certain thoughts from his mind. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, Chewie began to stroke himself. He tried to keep it slow. He tried to keep it slow and deliberate so as not to wake Han Solo, but passion got the best of him, and he started thumping his leg like when you scratch a dog just right. Eventually, all the commotion woke the slumbering scoundrel.
He's basically a big dog.
It took Han a moment to realize what was going on, but when he did, his reaction surprised even himself. He expected to at best be annoyed, and at worst be disgusted, but instead he realized he was even more titillated than before. He pretended to be asleep for a moment, all the while listening to Chewbacca's ever-increasing breathing and heartbeat. The Wookiee began to stroke harder, and Han could keep his ruse up no longer, his own heartbeat increasing to match that of Chewbacca. Han reached out and grabbed Chewie by the arm, which startled the Wookiee. He expected to be reprimanded, but instead Han just smiled and placed the Chewie's hand on top of his own throbbing member, guiding him in slow, rhythmic strokes. As Han's head rolled back in ecstasy, Chewie let out a soft growl of anticipation. Han reached out, and the two began mutually masturbating one another briefly, but now a fully awake Han sat up and pushed Chewbacca down.
One of the things I have to say this real quick.
You what?
One of the things about that I'm worried about even hearing this is, you know, when you get one of those products that to open it, you have to pull a tab and you break the tab off and you're like, how do I even get this open?
Yeah.
Chewbacca
You're worried for Han.
Yeah. A lot.
I understand. Don't worry. This story will take a twist that goes in your favor shortly.
Well, I think this has all been in my favor.
Han began to grind on Chewbacca's fuzzy genitals, and the gruff scoundrel reached out and placed his hands on Chewie's chest, searching underneath his fur for one of his 8 nipples. Upon finding one, Han squeezed and twisted, harder than he probably should have, but Chewbacca just roared in the throes of passion. Roar! Roar! Chewbacca begged. But Han slowed his pace to a crawl and said, "Easy, pal. We don't want this to be over in less than 12 parsecs now, do we?" After all, passion ain't like dust and crops. Without precise calculations, we could fly right through the climax, and that would end our trip real quick, wouldn't it? Chewie could contain himself no more, however, and he let out a mighty roar, lifting Han Solo to clean off the bed. Oh. That makes...
Not yet.
I guess that's like 10 minutes later.
Chewie could contain himself no more, however, and he let out a mighty roar, lifting Han Solo clean off the bed. Standing up, he grabbed Hans's belt and began furiously tugging at his pants. Han looked at Chewie and said, "Great kid, now don't get cocky." Then Solo pulled off Chewbacca's bandolier as the Wookiee finally removed Hans's pants and belt. Meanwhile, in the adjacent room, C-3PO had woken from power-saving mode due to all of the commotion. The golden droid listened for a moment, but couldn't figure out what he was hearing. He reached over to his friend and partner R2-D2 and gave a swift bonk onto the droid's top compartment. 3PO, with an air of annoyance, said to R2, "Wake up, you bucket of bolts." Something, and I know that's not how... I don't even remember how he talks, actually.
Wake up, you bucket of bolts.
It's like all the whiny voices I did in your President zombie story.
I'll just read it normal. "Wake up, you bucket of bolts. Something curious is going on in the ship, and like usual, it's up to me to figure it all out." R2, also coming out of power-saving mode, let out a tired beep and whistle before lighting up and starting towards the door. 3PO immediately protested. Where are you going? This is my mission. You'll only get us killed with your aggressive nonsense. But R2 paid the spindly droid no mind and went on his way to investigate. Alone in the room, 3PO said to himself loudly, Am I the only sane one in this place? Before hurriedly chasing after his friend. By the time 3PO caught up to R2, the smaller droid was silently peering through the slightly cracked door to Han Solo's cabin, where Captain Solo was busy furiously thrusting into a growling and moaning Chewbacca. What on earth is going on in there, R2? Is someone hurt? Asked the protocol droid.
Well, they would have been if they did it the opposite way.
R2's singular photoreceptor was extended fully and swiftly rotating. He beeped a response to 3PO, who recoiled in shock. They are doing what in there? 3PO asked indignantly. But R2 didn't answer 3PO, and instead focused on Han Solo's bare butt, gleaming in the faint light of the electronic instruments. The little droid leaned back, and suddenly his third leg burst out from within his chassis and planted itself firmly on the floor. His process status indicator began to wildly flash between red and blue, and steam began to seep out of his upper vents. 3PO was completely taken aback, both by the sordid reaction of his partner and upon seeing what was occurring in Captain Solo's room. The droid's arms gesticulated wildly in the air as he let out a frantic, "Oh my goodness!" He continued, "If you don't calm down, you'll be malfunctioning within a day, you nearsighted scrap pile." But just then, in the cabin, Chewie took control and opened his mouth wide, taking every ounce of Han Solo's rigid cock into it. A moan from Solo caused R2's circuits to begin firing even faster than before. Usually the astromech droid could keep his composure no matter what horrible thing 3PO was saying about him. But his passion programming was at its peak. The smaller droid spun his dome to face 3PO, who was babbling about something mean.
Accurate.
I think the C-3PO characterization is perfect. Complaining and being mean.
Before he could even protest, R2 shoved 3PO into the wall, pinning him to it with his blue and white chassis. "How dare you push me, you overweight glob of grease?" 3PO shouted. But the more he struggled, the more R2 pressed. After countless insults and a myriad of shrill screaming from 3PO, R2 could take it no more, and suddenly his scomp link interface burst from his chassis and penetrated the taller droid's socket. 3PO let out a yelp and angrily said, "You and your rusty innards! This is not becoming of a droid of my stature." But R2 did not waver in his actions. With one sensor focusing on the moaning Wookiee and another on his beautiful golden god, his processors were running at full capacity. After the initial shock of all what was happening wore off, 3PO began to really get into it. He hadn't felt this good since that desperately needed oil bath given to him by Master Luke after he wandered Tatooine for hours. He remembered just how bad his bout of dust contamination was then, but quickly refocused on the events at hand. "Fine, you naughty tin can," 3PO snarled as R2 had his way with the chassis. "As a protocol droid, I'm fluent in over 6 million forms of communication, and passion is one of those 6 million. 3PO engaged his backup power supply and began feeding data through R2's scomp link faster than he ever had before. From the other room, a moan of delight came falling out of Han Solo's mouth as Chewie stuck a thumb up his ass while simultaneously giving him oral pleasure. Han blurted out, "Lap it up, fuzzball," as he reached climax and shot first.
Once again, that's always the answer.
Yep.
Han shot first.
Meanwhile, R2's system was simply overwhelmed by the intense flow of data from his lover, and his circuits began to pop and explode before he finally let out a loud "wheew." With a blast of electricity from his scomp link, the small droid was launched clear across the room and into the Dejeric holochest table. As Han strapped his blaster belt back around his waist, he looked down at Chewie, who was merely smiling back up at him. Han, always ready with the quip, pulled out a Republic dattery, flipped it off of his thumb at Chewbacca and said, "Hey, clean up here, will ya? Sorry about the mess." Chewie let out a soft little laugh, and the smuggler swaggered his way out into the main room. Upon seeing C-3PO, who was busy wiping down his parts, Solo asked the droid what he was doing. 3PO thought for a moment before saying, "You're quite clever for a human being, Captain Solo. Perhaps you could figure it out. But I will tell you the odds of you having a better time than I are 3,720 to 1. Han Solo took a deep breath, raised his eyes to meet the droid's photoreceptors, and said with a wry smile, "Never tell me the odds."
I wouldn't have minded if somehow we got back to Pete Lightning at the end.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I think Pete Lightning won, right? Like that's, or no, is he dead?
No, he won that exchange because Delirious, the villain, he died.
So the building only crushed him, though. Pete was fine.
Yeah. His building was stable, but the dome that was covering the sky to collect rainwater to sell back to the town,
Right.
it collapsed and crushed Delirious. So Pete was fine. He hid behind a Branscombe ledge or whatever it was called.
Now, would it be unfair to assume that perhaps future adventures might appear in installments of future stories that you write?
Absolutely. In fact, Pete Lightning came from a game night that we had, and it was you draw a character or whatever, and I drew a character, and I have had the character in my head for a while. I want to write an actual, like a stupid youth adult book or whatever about Pete Lightning Boy Architect, because to me that sounds like Harry Potter or whatever.
I really like the idea too of making it like this action guy who's just his power is designing houses,
And he knows every little thing about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
all
that's
those
great.
tubes they put the blueprints in, I think those are cool.
Those are pretty cool. I like those because they're nicely made. They're sturdy.
Yeah, you could also put a map in there.
Or
If
a
you had
poster.
a good map.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was Pete Lightning. Now, the goal with this was to swerve you again, Spencer,
I think you went even deeper into this one, didn't
Yeah.
you?
than
Yeah.
the Palpatine one. Yeah.
Yeah, because that was a whole story within a story that Chewie was reading.
More in line with like a softcore porno from like Cinemax or like one of those things from the 90s. This includes like different sex scenes.
Yeah, we got like almost an orgy, honestly. All they had to do was
Almost.
realize that they were all doing the same thing and just get it in there together.
The second swerve I wanted to do was that Han and Leia were going to fuck.
I think that was a really nice touch to give the hint of what would obviously happen and then be like, no, we're gonna go this way now.
Yeah.
For some reason, I never at all thought you were going to do a
No,
heterosexual sex scene between two main characters.
who actually were lovers in the show.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, the humor behind this is we're all three heterosexual men. I don't care if you're homosexual or any of
No.
that. It's funnier to me that I'm writing Star Wars homosexual fanfic.
Well, and also, I should mention cross species.
Yes, that happens frequently. Oh my, every time actually, now I think about it. Anakin and Watto, human Toydarian.
And way different sizes all times, too.
That's true, yeah, because then we got Yoda and Palpatine, human and
Yeah.
whatever Yoda is. And then here, well, I guess the two droids, that's as close to a natural relationship as we've seen.
Right,
And they're
despite
not real.
being, made of bolts.
Mm-hmm.
Man, what a journey we've been on today.
So now that we've had 3 of these, though, what was your favorite sex story of the 3?
I honestly think I might like the Yoda and Palpatine one best because they're enemies, and they not only do they
It was a hate fuck.
not only did they kind of figure out that maybe they're not so different, you and I, but maybe you and I should fuck.
Mhm.
And that's a nice little twist that they were battling and then it turned into that. But honestly, you can't go wrong. I recommend all 3 of them to everyone.
Brian?
The Han Chewie one is my new favorite.
Oh, okay.
Maybe to everyone's surprise, but Han was so in character the whole time. I was
He was
pretty into the
Smug and fun.
and how he just flippantly was like, fuck it.
And Chewie, who I recently rewatched the original trilogy just for funsies, and Chewie in that is a big, mean, scary monster to everyone but Han.
Mhm.
Han, he is such a softie.
So you think it's because he's in love with them?
Maybe a little. I mean, you're 2 scoundrels flying through space. You get bored. You get a little horny. Who's to say something didn't happen?
The idea of Chewie being like a big, like you said, a big dog, like a pet that
Mhm.
like he just worships Han and Han kind of treats him that way is pretty cool.
Fun fact, the thump his leg like a dog was
My
added
favorite part of the whole
after
thing.
the fact. I didn't have that after I wrote it, and I was like, I need something because there wasn't enough goofy, so I threw that in there.
And it reiterated the fact that Chewbacca is a bear man.
And the 8 nipples,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
There's also like most of it, you're using pretty flowery language to kind of, it's not direct and it's not crass or anything too vulgar. And then occasionally it just is. Like there's
Right.
like stuck a finger up his ass.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it gets like just randomly kind of really dirty.
It's really funny you mention that because at one point I used the word cock.
Yes.
And I remember thinking, is that too graphic for this? Because although I've done these
I don't
very
think,
sexual deeds,
I was going to
I hadn't
say.
used the language.
yeah. But in terms of too graphic, I don't know. Where's the ceiling on that with these? I guess we'll find out
Well,
next
in
year.
the middle when the ceiling was covered with Yodas.
I know you can't see it
Such a
even.
mess.
You're like, oh, wow, is the sky green tonight?
What's funny is I did listen to our previous Creepypasta episodes before writing this, and I knew I was going to do this to you,
Of course.
Spencer,
No, I
so-
expected it.
Anyway, it was a lot of fun. this whole thing was a lot of fun. We had some great stories here. We hope you as the listeners enjoyed this. Definitely stick around for another year because we'll be back doing this again next year. Who knows what Star Wars characters will fuck?
I mean, but next week we probably won't fuck any Star Wars characters. It'll be more when we talk about TV again, I think.
Yeah, probably. But jury's still out. We don't know
you
if
never
that'll
know.
happen. Go check out all of our stuff available on youtube.com/Bootu Inc. Check out bootuinc.com, the website. We have GIFs, we have written stuff, all kinds of awesome things on there. And of course, stick around for the main shows available wherever you get your podcasts.
So 5-star review on Apple
Podcasts.
on whatever podcast app you have, which is probably Apple Podcast because that's the common one.
Or Spotify. Spotify is actually the number one thing for podcasts now.
Whatever you're listening on, go in there and give us a 5-star review. We're going to get Chewbacca's dick tattooed on our body somewhere.
You can put that in the record book because we'll do it. All right. So for everyone else, we'll catch you next time on the Boob Tube Boys. And let's each do our best Chewbacca.
Oh, yeah. I forgot he does the little, that's almost like a rolling R sort of sound. Let me try.
Okay.
Let me try.
Oh, he's Hispanic in this.
Arriba.
Speedy Gonzalez. I thought we did away with him.
That was it, though. That was my attempt there.
It was pretty good.
standing by it.
I think if you combine yours and mine, we had a pretty good one.
And mine, obviously.
He has a sombrero on in this
Let's
scenario.
maracas to get us out
Let's
of this
end
one.
the episode by Chewbacking all at once.
On 3. 1, 2.